Hello, everyone. I'm Dr. Christian Barrientos. Ichaso. I'm international business lawyer and business company. We talk about in this podcast with international security, international law. This is international law channel. Thank you for subscribe. Thank you for sharing everything about the security, compliance, anti-corruption, anti-crime, and all trade matters. Thank you. And we have this podcast in special edition, Martin Arostegui. He's a renowned and highly experienced journalist, especially in military and intelligence matters, who has covered the key of international conflicts we are now seeing deploying in Ukraine. He has worked for Voice of America, Wall Street Journal, the Daily Telegraph, the Washington Times, CNN, Fox News, United Press International, and France 24. Thank you for subscribing. And he's author of a book about the military special operation called Twilight Warriors. Thank you, Martin, for this podcast continued in this week.
Thanks, Christian. Thanks for having me on board. Pleasure to see you as always. I suppose that as usual, I think probably we will continue to do as long as this war is over. And as I said, it's going to be a long one. We're going to start with an update on what is happening in Ukraine. It's an update in which there really isn't, I must say, it's very hard to specify any specific update because it's so over the past week, not much, for the past week, 10 days, not much has changed. It's at a stalemate, which is curious because everyone expected that with Russia now capable of concentrating all of its forces in eastern Ukraine to to consolidate its hold over the Donbass region and the southern coast of Ukraine, connecting up to Crimea, parts of which they had controlled even before the war. They had a strong local influence before the war. But by now, they may have made some substantial progress. And the answer to that, quite frankly, is no, they have not made any substantial progress. Things are at best in a stalemate. The Russians take control of certain towns one day and then they're chased out the next day. There are ongoing artillery duels. I think it's possible the Ukrainians are taking more severe casualties because they're in a more exposed position. It's more open ground, more favorable to Russian armor and artillery. Although, even the armor isn't performing very well because there have been rains and the tanks can't maneuver in the very thick mud, which forms there in early spring. So it's a stalemate. At best, it's at a stalemate for Russia. The Ukrainians, like I said, have been taking some rather heavier casualties than they possibly did in the north, due to the strategic and geographical conditions, which in some ways give a battlefield advantage to Russia. But they have received this week a very important reinforcement. They have received about 100, maybe up to 150 American M777 howitzer field guns. These are very powerful cannon, 155 millimeter field artillery, and capable of firing with very long range. They can fire up to maybe 20 kilometers. And this will certainly give the Ukrainians a strong response capacity against the Russian artillery, which of course is one of the main thing Russia has used against the Ukrainians, because in regular infantry to infantry fighting, the Russians have not so far been able to prevail most of the time. Their troops have very low morale, is one of the reasons given. And while they have certain elite mercenary units operating there, there's probably not enough of them to counter the highly motivated, in some ways highly ultra-nationalistic fanatically ultra-nationalistic units the Ukrainians have, like the Azov Battalion. So the Ukrainians have received these supplies from NATO. They are having their artillery teams trained in NATO countries, in Germany and other NATO countries, by the US. And this could give them a strategic edge, or enough of an edge anyway, on the battlefield to be able to hold their own against any further Russian offensives, and to be able to counter Russian artillery. They have received, in addition to the actual field guns, the actual howitzer artillery field guns, they received also artillery radar. This is radar that is used to locate locations from which an artillery barrage is coming. In other words, a Russian cannon or rocket launcher fires into Ukrainian positions. An artillery radar allows the Ukrainians to locate from where the fire is coming and counter that fire with their own long-range artillery, which they're being fired. So this gives the Ukrainians a very important edge on the battlefield. It allows them to hold their own, basically. It allows them to hold their own. We don't know at this point how the Russians are going to escalate. I mean, it's at a stalemate, as we say. They're having a very hard time controlling eastern Ukraine, which is the least they can get out of this whole thing. I mean, they cannot lead Ukraine for less than that. They cannot call a ceasefire. They cannot call off a war. They cannot enter into a very serious negotiation unless they can at least claim territory that they hold, because in a negotiation, it's very difficult to claim territory that you don't hold. Nobody's going to give you that. So they have to hold territory that they're going to claim in eventual negotiations with Ukraine. And they're having a hard time getting that. It seems Odessa, for example, at the moment seems out of the question. They're not going to be able to capture Odessa. So again, that little strip between Crimea and the border between Ukraine and Moldavia, where there is in Moldavia, there is an area in Transnistria, where there is some Russian presence. There's a pro-Russian region of Moldavia, which obviously they were hoping to connect to through Odessa. They're not at the moment. Odessa is off the cards. I mean, there's no way they can take that city right now. They're still having a hard time controlling Mariupol. I mean, it's largely in Russian control, but they still can't get the Azov Battalion out of the steelwork where they've been entrenched for the past few weeks. So now, what does Russia do? Well, I mean, there are some encouraging signs. The Russians are cooperating with the United Nations. Okay. Putin received UN Secretary General Guterres in Moscow last week, and since then, under UN auspices, they have set up safe corridors to get Ukrainian civilians out of Mariupol that were stuck in Mariupol. They have, in the humanitarian aspect, there has been some progress as far as getting Russia to cooperate in some of the humanitarian aspects of it, which is and the question is whether Russia can actually, how long they're going to stand for the current status quo. I mean, as I said, they've been saying the only thing they can escalate to at this stage to make any decisive difference, it would seem, right, unless we have some great surprise in the field performance of their army, would be weapons of mass destruction, would be technical nukes. We've been told repeatedly by top Russian officials not to discard them, but this could happen. We've been told the high NATO officials have not discarded it either. And in fact, this week, the Russians even went so far as to threaten the British with a direct attack against Britain, against the UK, the United Kingdom, for their very militant and very bellicose, very upfront support of Ukraine. I mean, the British even have troops. I mean, they have special forces units in Ukraine. I don't know if the US does, at least not in a direct capacity. I'm sure they have contracts with it. But in fact, a lot of the Ukrainian army is being run by American contractor army contractors with CIA money. But as far as I know, there aren't any actual American military units in Ukraine. The British have this. The SAS is in there, the British Special Air Service, at least in the training capacity inside Ukraine, which supposedly they were all supposed to be out of there. And the British have been very key in supplying arms and to the Ukrainian army, some very decisive weapons. They supplied the Ukrainians with a laser-guided anti-aircraft shoulder-fired missile. It's a laser-guided manpad, which until now, I knew it wasn't developed, but I think it's the first time it's actually been battle tested. And it's been decisive in gaining control and denying Russia control of the air. These are laser-guided missiles, laser-guided weapons, for which there are no countermeasures. The Russians have developed no counter. In fact, nobody has developed countermeasures. Until now, all anti-aircraft systems are heat-seeking missiles, for which they have most aircraft, warplanes, and helicopters have countermeasures. For these laser-guided missiles, there are no countermeasures. The Russians have no. And it's been a decisive factor in the ability of the Ukrainians to deny Russian air superiority or air control. So obviously, the Britain is the most vociferous ally of Ukraine. The ones that they openly say that Putin has to lose, that they openly encourage Zelensky not to give in any concessions in the negotiations, and that they have to defeat Putin. So the Russians have now threatened Britain with possible nuclear retaliation if they continue in their this kind of attitude. Now, whether they would also ultimately resort to probably a more modest use of nuclear weapons, tactical nukes, 1-2 kiloton tactical nuclear bombs that can be fired of artillery shells. We have yet to see. I mean, it's possible. It's possible to clear out maybe the Ukrainian position in the center of the Donbass region, Kramatorsk and all that, which they have to control that. There are Ukrainian positions how to contest it. Possibly, maybe they could use something like that there. But perhaps if the Russians were to do that, with the howitzers that Ukraine had received from the United States this week, they could also, if supplied with a tactical nuke by NATO, counter a Russian attack, a Russian tactical nuke attack with maybe their own tactical nuke, because they have the delivery system. All they would need at this point is they have the nuclear warhead, a small nuclear warhead delivered to them, which they could possibly respond to a Russian nuclear attack. Whether this happens, whether the Russians and the Ukrainians exchange tactical nuclear field weapons, and it escalates from there, we don't know. But I think this is a distinct possibility. And I think if the Russians now do escalate to the use of a tactical nuke field weapon, that possibly NATO would counter with their own within the Ukrainian theater without having to go outside, without having from the NATO country.
What is your analysis of the possibility of a military attack on Poland by Russia? Is possible?
At this point, I would say it's very unlikely, Christian. I mean, the Russian army is, as we all know, is performing much below any expectations anybody had. I mean, they're now in eastern Ukraine having a difficult time controlling territory that they're already supposed to control. It looks like this is going to go on for a very, very long time.
Yeah.
I don't see how the Russians could possibly be in any shape or have the army to attack another country, especially Poland, which is far, far better armed than Ukraine, where NATO would respond and where any Russian attack would be without question repulsed in the most in a very decisive way. I mean, there's a possibility where they could meddle at this stage is maybe Moldavia, which is Ukraine's it's on Ukraine's southeastern border, southern border. It's very near Odessa, and that was the fear. In fact, that's the plan. That was the plan at this stage. They would take Odessa and from there connect with Transnistria, which is similar to Luhansk and Donetsk in Ukraine or pro-Russian regions, where there already is some degree of Russian military presence. And where, interestingly enough, there were some disturbances over the past week. There were some disturbances, there was some violence, there was some civil disturbances, some terrorist type attacks by pro-Russian separatists, very similar to what was going on in eastern Ukraine before the war, before Russia invaded. And yeah, they would link up with that and go into Moldova, which is completely independent. It's not a part of NATO. They would walk. I imagine they would walk over that in a very short period of time. Although we never know. I mean, everybody's going to walk into Ukraine without a problem. You know what's happening there. So, but that's where conceivably they could go on. They could go if they find some way of taking or at least neutralizing Odessa. But an attack against a major NATO country at this stage, any kind of an invasion, I would discount that as impossible. Look, the Russians have lost 10 of their generals. You know that? 9 or 10. There are 20 generals supposedly directing the operation in Ukraine. Half of them have been shot by Ukrainian snipers. And the reason they were shot by Ukrainian snipers is because things are going so badly for the troops. The situation is so disorganized. Discipline breaks down. Supply and logistical chains are so weak. The generals often have to go to the front to sort out, local matters. Their communications are intercepted. The Ukrainian special forces know they're on their way, and they have a sniper waiting for them. And they've shot about 10 generals in this day.
10 generals.
10. It's about half the amount of generals they have there. In fact, the other day, one of the generals that was wounded was somebody very close to Putin, one of his I think the head of the Joint Chiefs of Staff. So
it's incredible.
How an army in that state could possibly invade Poland?
It's impossible.
It's impossible. I really wouldn't worry about it. I really wouldn't worry about it.
Russia preparing an illegitimate Donbass referendum. Is it possible this moment?
Well, that's what the Russians want, okay? And I suppose they would settle for that. And I think they're trying to get the UN support for that, which is one of the reasons they're trying to be nice. Setting up a humanitarian corridor and allowing civilians to leave. I mean, they apparently actually allowed civilians to leave this week and go into the Western Ukraine region controlled by the Ukrainian government, and not that they were deporting them into Russia, into labor camps, which they've done with, I think, quite a few. I mean, I don't know how many, but tens of thousands of Ukrainians are now currently in Russian labor camps. Or disappearing. They've gone to Russia and just disappeared. The children are sold off and adopted by Russian families. No, I mean, yeah, they were there. I mean, it's clear, symptoms of ethnic cleansing. I mean, honestly, it seems that now after his talk with Guterres, I think they're being, they're walking that back a bit, and I say that they're being nice. Because obviously they want the UN to support probably a referendum in the Luhansk and Donetsk regions, so they can do that and claim and Putin can claim Eastern Ukraine, or at least a part of Eastern Ukraine for Russia. And the only saving way is I get out of it. Also, the Pope apparently this week. Frankly, I don't follow too much what the Pope says, but Pope Francis this week also came out with a pro-Russian statement. He said that he was going to go and visit and visit Putin in Moscow, and that he attacked Zelensky for having barked at Russia's door, for having called the war by barking at Russia's door, for being too aggressive. His attitude toward Russia, blaming it all on the So Russia's obviously positioning, manipulating a diplomatic offensive to find a way out of Ukraine, which of course involved a kind of international recognition of a referendum in the Donbass region, and pressure on the Ukrainians to also accept the results of the referendum in the Donbass region. And also, I mean, bear in mind, again, things are going well for Russia in areas where people thought that there wasn't going well, to the economic sphere. Europe remains divided about cutting off Russian oil and gas, despite the EU, supposedly ordering it, although they can't be ordering it. Ultimately, it has to be up to the individual governments. Several governments are resisting, including Germany. Germany has cut off oil purchases of Russian oil, but they're continuing to get gas because that's the main supply of gas. It's going to take a long time because of their green policy, which made them dependent on Russian gas.
Yeah, it's dependent.
The green policies that were championed by Angela Merkel, the former the former German prime minister, chancellor. I mean, there's no way Germany can possibly replace the amount of gas it's getting from Russia. No way, without paralyzing its economy. So that's not going to happen. And some European countries have shut out Russian oil. Some haven't. So it's the Europeans are very, very divided. And though they try to give the appearance of unity, joint statements, and all that, ultimately when it comes to brass tacks, they have not been able to establish a joint policy against the purchase of Russian gas, which is the main source of revenue of the Putin government. That's it, the only source of revenue. The sanctions are beginning to hit Russia hard, but Putin, I think, is getting enough money from gas and from gold and minerals he is still selling in very large quantities to India, to China, through a barter system, through a gold-backed ruble system, trying to sell between each other, and to be able to keep his military guy. Again, I mean, even the military is hurting. I mean, for example, this war has revealed that while Russia produces a lot of arms, a lot of weapon systems, sophisticated weapon systems, the electronics for the weapon systems come from the United States and Europe, and they're not getting they're not getting this technology now. That has been cut off. So, which means that Russia is going to get to a point, if it hasn't already, in which it cannot produce more, guided missiles, more radar, more technology intensive or technology dependent weapon system. There are tanks. Apparently, there's no one producing any more tanks. But, the Russian, I think Putin, as long as he produces AK-47s and has a limited amount of men, he can put an AK-47 in our and send him to Donbass for about 2 weeks of training. I guess that's all he needs to work on. So that, as far as it will certainly hamper Russia's performance, but as far as being a dissuasive factor in Russia's ability to continue to maintain military pressure on Ukraine, I don't think
so. So in this international operation for support to Ukraine with more weapons, technology for this armament, why you need to know for the protect for this week in this moment in the Donbass? Ukraine need more weapons or need a strategy for control the Donbass region?
Well, sure. I mean, I think they need innumerable weapons, and what they would probably need to make it to be able to decisively counter the Russians would be an air force. I mean, the Ukrainian air force is pretty small. They have been replacing some of the Soviet era MiG fighters that the Ukrainians had, with some from stocks of some, maybe Egypt or Eastern European countries that also had shared or at one time had Soviet equipment from time of the Warsaw Pact. But this is probably the weakest point. They're not able, well, the Russians aren't able to dominate the air. The Ukrainians don't dominate the air, don't have the air capability to be able to decisively act in the air either. So conduct decisive strikes to wipe out entire Russian positions, that kind of thing. And the Ukrainians don't really have that capacity. And while the West has been supplying them some, planes the Ukrainian pilots are trained to use, because I mean, they can't get no point of giving F-16s, because the Ukrainian pilots aren't trained to fly F-16s. It takes a long time to train a pilot to fly a high performance fighter of the F-16 or F-15 Mirage or whatever. So that's I don't see any indication that's going to change. I don't see any indication that they're going to give them, they're capable or able or willing to give them the type of air support, air assets that it needs to make a decisive difference in the battlefield. But I think we're going to discuss another matter, Christian. A matter, in fact, somehow connected with Russia's ability to continue its war effort in Ukraine, and that is the gold mine. Interpol, I think, put out a report in the past week pointing out to a huge increase in illegal gold mining all over the world, and which is understandable in view of the fact that the value of gold has gone up considerably. That many economists are considering that now gold could conceivably replace the dollar again. It could go back on a kind of gold standard that the Russians are trying to do. Well, it's interesting that Russia is trying to do this. They want to reintroduce a kind of gold standard for their currency, the ruble. And the increase in illegal gold mining may well be Russian. It may a lot of the illegal gold mining going around the world could well be Russian. It's interesting that one of the countries with one of the highest levels of illegal gold production is Venezuela, where there's a whole strip of gold mining, gold mines in the Department of Bolívar, southeastern Department of Bolívar, which borders Guyana, and where a massive amount of gold would be taken out. I mean, nobody provides figures, but it's a considerable amount of gold going out of there. Controlled by paramilitary groups, which control the area, mainly Colombian guerrilla organizations like the ELN and FARC, and where I've been also told that where the illegal gold mining is protected by top generals of the Venezuelan army who get a cut, with the rest going to Russian partners.
Yeah, it's true.
Who may be providing the capital and some of the capital to expand the mining of gold in Venezuela. All of this gold gets smuggled out. All of it gets smuggled out of Venezuela. Maybe a small amount goes into the Venezuelan central bank, but it all goes to the trades to Turkey, to United Arab Emirates, and to Russia, Dubai, which is of course a major international center now of black international black finance, and Russia. Russia is a major recipient, if not directly, then maybe indirectly through Dubai and Turkey. Well, maybe not Turkey at this stage, because they're pretty friends over the well, but certainly Dubai. There's a lot of big Russian presence. So that's one factor I think we have to take into account. In Africa, certainly, in Mali, they're very large builders. I'm sure that the Russian activity there is interested. The Russian interests that have gone into Mali, supported by the Wagner Group, have a lot to do with exploiting local development of gold, local production of gold for Russia. Which is what I said last week, developing alternative markets for gold to get to Russia, or possibly to get to third countries to which they can pay for certain goods or services they get from those countries with smuggled gold. I think the Wagner Group is possibly a key element, is a key element in organizing this Russia's illegal gold trade from Venezuela and Africa and third world areas where Russia has control.
Russia has Venezuelan gold reserves.
What, you mean Russia has holds Venezuelan gold reserves?
Yeah, Russia has Venezuela gold.
Very possible. Yeah.
Yeah, in this period of Maduro, the stock of gold changed to Russia for money, for liquid money, in this period of the economic Maduro's regime.
Mm-hmm.
It's extremely the case of the illegal.
No, the gold link there is very important. In fact, the Venezuelan admiral told me, who recently left Venezuela exile. I think he participated in one of the latest coup attacks. The one with a couple of years ago. He said, he told me that the Russians are more interested in Venezuela's gold than in the oil. But the main Russian interest in Venezuela is gold. And the reason the Wagner Group reinforced its presence in Venezuela at a time when there were very intense opposition pressure against Maduro, as well as U.S. pressure on President Trump, was basically to secure its to get as much gold out of there as they could in the event that Maduro fell, and to secure their assets in the mining sector. So that's the main interest of Venezuela, I'm told by members of the Venezuelan the gold.
So in this moment, Warning Group is changing the security in the region, the information in Venezuela, Nicaragua, and Cuba, and part of Latin America, how Peru and Bolivia. This irregular group of sicaries is possible to change the political scenario for the month in this period of the war.
Could you put that question again, Christian?
No.
You're talking about whether the Wagner Group could have a strategic contribution or
contribution
to what happens in Ukraine or elsewhere.
Contribution to the instability in Latin America, political economy.
Well, yeah, I think they've already gone a long way to stabilizing Venezuela. And controlling certain assets in Venezuela that Russia's interested in. They probably provide Maduro's personal security. That's my guess. I'd expect they have a finger in that. They're probably in Nicaragua as well. All right. And of course, we discussed quite some time ago, and undoubtedly in Cuba. But we discussed some time ago that the Wagner Group had formed a virtual alliance with Hezbollah. That they were recruiting Hezbollah fighters to go and fight in Ukraine. They had operated very closely with Hezbollah during the Syrian civil war. And in view of the fact that you have a large Hezbollah presence in Venezuela at an official level, I'm talking about members of the cabinet, very close aides to Maduro, who've been identified as members of Hezbollah, and that you have the Wagner Group there as well. What worries me is that the Wagner Group could conceivably plot with Hezbollah to conduct terrorist operations in Latin America or maybe against the United States as a way of retaliating for what the United States is doing in Ukraine. It would make complete sense. I mean, the U.S. is there running an insurgency against Russia. So the Russians may well decide that they can retaliate against that by running an insurgency against the U.S. in the border region, which, as we know, has been completely has been turned into a no man's land, where criminal drug cartels, anybody who can burrow his way in with illegal drugs and illegal immigrants has clout. So something like that sort could well be happening, and it could conceivably, depending on what they do, have a strategic effect, have strategic significance if the Russians are able, or Hezbollah are able to retaliate against the U.S. At the southern border. Through the southern.
That's very interesting. Hezbollah is our criminal organization in Latin America who's collaborated with the triple border. There is Iran. Iran president Hezbollah support Iran. It's a Lebanon origin. For conclusion, this moment, Martin Arostegui, why is your analysis for this moment, the security, international security?
Well, I mean, I think international security is, frankly, there's a lot of gloom and doom going on at this. I hardly think this is a very positive moment, but I really honestly think that ultimately things are going to be able to hold their own. It does seem that Russia, as bad as Putin is, he does seem to be opting for he wants some sort of negotiated solution to Ukraine. I think he realizes that's the only way out. I think it's really come back. And his talk with Guterres, his accession to some of the UN suggestions about humanitarian corridors, and stopping some of the most objectionable practices of mass deportation, forced deportation of populations, and possibly whatever he's talking about to the Pope, right? He's ready to make a visit to talk to Putin. It seems like he's obviously making some effort with those international venues which he can, which are useful for setting up negotiations and agreements to try to negotiate his way out of it. Because there's no, as I say, the only way Putin can win in Ukraine is by destroying Ukraine, right? And I think perhaps Putin is having second thoughts about what usefulness that will be to him, where that may lead. So that's what I would expect at the moment. Now things can change at any moment. We don't know. Again, as I said, back in the old days, in the Soviet Union, there was a collective leadership of Communist Party gerontocrats who decided policy among each other and sort of shared power among each other. That's not the case today. It's Putin and only Putin. So it's all in his head, and that's what makes it dangerous.
Very interesting. Thank you so much, Martin Arostegui. Thank you, friend.
Thank you, Christian.
Thank you.
See you next week.
Next week, we'll continue with podcast. Thank you all.
See you later.
Yeah, thank you, and subscribe and share this video. With Martin Arostegui, the most important journalist. Next podcast. See you later. Bye, Martin.
See you later. Bye-bye.